Yes.
Hi everyone, good evening. Myself
Good
CA
evening.
Samir Ledda, former chairman of Pune branch, welcomes you all on this today's session on the live webinar on section 148. CA Dr. Raj Chawla, Vice Chairman of Directors Committee and Central Council member. Today's honorable speaker CA Rajan Vora, my co-host CA Girish Shah and CA Jay Prakash Palor, and all the chartered accountants from Directors Committee from our ICAI and all August audience. Welcome in today's webinar on section 148. Uh, I request now say Dr. Raj Chawla, Vice Chairman of Directors Committee, please give opening remarks for this session. Over to you, say Dr. Raj Chawla, sir.
Thank you, Samir Bhai. Good evening to all. First of all, I welcome our panelists and persons, our speaker of today program, Rajan Vora ji, our our panelists Jayaprakash ji, Hanish ji, Samir ji, and Girish ji. So, at the outset, I, on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, extend a warm welcome to CA CV Chitale sir, Chairman Direct Tax Committee in absentia, because in this webinar on issue in section 148 of the Income Tax Act and its way forward. Also, I welcome on behalf of this committee, esteemed Speaker CA Rajan Vora ji. It is indeed pleasure to have you, sir, as our honorable speaker, and I really thank you for giving your time in your busy schedule for sharing knowledge with all of us. DTC of ICI is a partner in nation building, has always been working towards facilitating the objective of the government, at the same time play a pivotal role in the strengthening and relationship between the taxpayer and the department by bringing to the matters of department genuine hardship being faced by the assessees under the Income Tax Act, and to ensure timely redressal of the same, and by helping the stakeholder for proper and timely compliances. Our today topic of discussion in the issue in section 148 of the Income Tax Act 1961 and its way forward. The sad judgment has opened a Pandora box for all the affected assessees. The sad judgment by the Apex Court was delivered in the first week of May 22 only. The Finance Act 21 had introduced new procedure to be adopted mandatory for assessment under the Income Tax Act 1961 by inserting section 148A. However, the central government extended the timeline expiring on 31st March 21 to 30th June 21, prescribed under section 149 for issuance of reassessment notice under section 148 of the Income Tax Act 1961. Now, despite the amendment by Finance Act 21, the assessing authorities issued as many around 90,000 reassessment notices from 1st April 21 to 30th June 21 under the erstwhile provision of the Act thereof, by applying on explanation in the notification dated 31st March 21 and 27 April 21, agreed by the same, the said reassessment notices were the subject matter of writ petition before the various high courts. Respective high courts, except Chhattisgarh High Court, held that all the reassessment notices issued under the erstwhile section 148 to 151 of the Income Tax Act 1961 are bad in law, as the reassessment notices issued after 1st April 21 are governed by the section 147 to 151 of Income Tax Act 1961 as amended by the Finance Act 2021. Consequently, the High Court set aside all the reassessment notices issued under section 148 of the Income Tax Act 1961, agreed by the same. The revenue appealed before the Honorable Supreme Court. Therefore, the Supreme Court on 4th of May 2022 passed a judgment and held that the reassessment notices issued under the unamended section 148 of the Income Tax Act on or after April 1st, 21 will not be deemed to be invalid just because they are issued under the old law, while modifying the relevant order of various high court that request the reassessment notices issued under the section after the cut-off date. The Supreme Court said that these notices will be deemed as show cause notice issued to the respective assessee under the new section 148 of the Act. The Supreme Court order would mean that the change in law can't be an alibi for taxpayer to escape the proceeding initiated via the notices. Right after the said Supreme Court judgment, the CBDT had also issued a internal instructions number 01 by 22 dated 11th May 22 to its officers regarding implementation of judgment of Honorable Supreme Court dated 4th of May 22, Union of India versus Ashish Agarwal. Now all the affected parties are concerned and future course of action is being discussed. I hope that the participant would be benefited a lot from the today's interaction and discussion, and also it would provide an ease in implementing the topic of deliberated upon. So thank you, Samir Bhai, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सर. Thanks for your opening remarks to this session. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our today's very senior and learned speakers here, Rajan Vora sir. He heads in EY India Direct Tax Litigation Practice and is a partner member in firm in EY Global presently based in Mumbai. He has extensive experience in representing tax litigation matters before the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Authority for Advance Rulings. His experience includes more than 4 decades in litigation, tax advisory, and corporate tax advisory services, with specialization in transfer pricing and international tax issues. He was the president of Bombay Chartered Accounting Society in 1991. He has authored several publications of professional organizations like that of ICAI, BCA, and Chamber of Tax Consultants, etc. He is chairman of Direct Taxation Committee of IMC Chamber of Commerce. He is closely associated with the activities of the BCA, Chamber of Tax Consultants, and ICAI. He was also named as consecutively for the 10 times amongst top tax dispute advisors in India by Euromoney International Tax Review magazine, published from London in 2020. He has presented papers and he has been regular panel speaker in seminars and in India and abroad. With this, I welcome Vora sir to you on behalf of all the panelists as well as participants. I request you, please take the charge of the session. Over to you, Rajan Vora sir.
Good evening to everybody. Thank you very much, Raj Chawla ji, Samir Leta ji, Girish Shah ji, to welcome me and also giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the important provisions or important amendments relating to reassessment and also the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Ashish Agarwal's case, which our Honorable our Vice Chairman said it is a sad decision. We'll reserve our comments till we analyze the judgment, whether it is a good, bad, or ugly, or sad. Whatever observations, we'll keep that for the time being, and we'll decide. We also will thank Chandrasekhar Chitle, who is a good friend of ours for the last several years. So in absentia, he called me. He's traveling to Pune, so because of which he is not being present for this session today. Thanks also to Shrutika for coordinating with us and getting all this organized, including the technical team for getting this webinar organized properly. Friends, it gives a great pleasure to be part of the activities of the Institute, which I am a member for last 47 years. I have been active in many of the committees of the Institute. I also was part of the DTC for a few years and now more active in the International Tax Committee of the Institute. Friends, the topic selected today, earlier Chitle had called me and said that should we do only a session on the Supreme Court decision. So I felt that instead of doing only the analysis of that, it is worthwhile to discuss the background of these amendments in 21 and 22 and then look to the what is the decision which is rendered by the Supreme Court, which is a law of the land, unless it's reviewed by the Supreme Court themselves. And as Dr. Raji rightly mentioned, it has reversed several decisions of the Supreme High Courts to come to the conclusion that these decisions need to be reversed, and therefore they have permitted all so-called 90,000 cases to be considered as valid, and they were allowed to be proceeded under the new provisions of Section 148A. So we'll come to that provisions a little later, but I think that's the point. The topic becomes very important because as age-old provisions of Section 147 were replaced by the whole new set of provisions by Finance Act 21, with the promise, assurance by the Finance Minister and various authorities that it is a revolutionary provision and this is for the purpose of simplification and avoiding the prolonged litigation. The Honorable Finance Minister, when she presented the budget, she also said, presently reassessments can be done, assessments can be reopened up to 6 years and serious fraud cases up to 10 years. As a result, taxpayers have to be under uncertainty for a long period. I therefore propose to reduce the time limit for reopening of assessment to 3 years from present 6 years, and serious tax cases where only there is evidence of concealment of income of 50 lakhs or more in a year can be reassessment be reopened for up to 10 years. Even this reopening can be done only with the approval of Principal Chief Commissioner, highest level of Income Tax Department. Now, look at this provision, the way these were introduced in 2021. And as Dr. Rajji rightly mentioned, these were sought to be clarified by the instructions of 11th December 21. And we'll touch upon that with little later, but so the clarification. Now look at the way the CBDT has interpreted those provisions, and the instructions have been given to the tax officials as to how they should do the reassessment proceedings, how they should conduct the reassessment proceedings. Before we get into what are the further amendments made in 2022, or before even allowing these new provisions to be settled down, further set of amendments have been made by the Finance Act 22 on 1st of February 22. That has virtually negated what has been said by the Finance Minister in her budget speech, and which I will touch upon how that her statement made in the Parliament has been reversed or virtually overturned by the subsequent amendments. According to me, there is no mention of her mentioning that these were the provisions I have introduced. Now I am revising the provisions for this reason. Nothing of that nature. Neither explanatory memorandum or memorandum explaining the amendments mentions anything about this, why this has been done. It is quietly done, and they are trying to push through a lot of changes which are done by this 22 amendment. As if that was not sufficient, before we could really settle down with understanding or relearning about 21 provisions, then 22 amendment came. Again, we have to unlearn what was learned earlier and then look to the new provisions of 22. We have one more, what we call it, a additional thought for our consideration or for discussion was Supreme Court decision in case of Ashish Agarwal, as Dr. Raj Chawla ji mentioned, on 4th of May 2022. Now, so we have not only to see what is the implication of 22 amendment or 21 amendment or the Supreme Court decision in the case of Ashish Agarwal, because that's a host of things which we need to look into. This was not sufficient. Then you will find, even to interpret the Supreme Court decision, there was a letter written by IRS officials, which is again part of a public circulation, is not something which is a confidential document, that they had written to CBDT the way they interpreted the Supreme Court decision, and post that CBDT issued instructions to their team, to the field officers, how those Supreme Court has to be interpreted. So we have to really look into whether the instructions issued by CBDT interpreting the provisions of 21, reassessment provisions of 21, as well as the instructions issued by CBDT 11th May 2022 in respect of interpretation of Supreme Court decision, is it really the appropriate way of mentioning or interpreting the provisions, or whether they have appropriately interpreted. Whether Supreme Court's view that this is trying to be settled down the issue by they will struck down the 90,000 cases by their own decision, which will take care of all the decisions. Now, as has been mentioned in earlier, when the 22-1 Act came, there was also time limit prescribed from time to time as to when they can issue the notices for reopening. As we are aware, taxation ordinance, what we popularly known as TOLA, extended the time limit for reopening of assessments from time to time, and the final such order was on 29th or 30th of March, extending the date to 30th of June 2021. As if it was not sufficient, assessing officers were hurriedly issued about 90,000 notices. That must be Guinness's world record of fastest way of our government officials or income tax department issuing between April and June 90,000 notices for reopening. So that means all those orders which were passed earlier had escaped assessment. As per their view, that all those assessments had escaped assessment. I have no count of how many cases were reopened prior to 31st March or what was done. We have only statistics as mentioned by the Supreme Court only in respect of notices issued after 1st April, taking the privilege of saying that this law to be interpreted or circular to be interpreted up to 30th of June, and therefore they can very well issue the notices, these 90,000 notices for reopening our assessments. Now, what has been done by the Supreme Court we'll touch upon a little later, but before that it is good to understand how the rule making, how the CBDT or the officials of the department take ministers for granted, taxpayers for granted, or even does not brief Supreme Court or does not tell the Supreme Court what is the appropriate provisions which need to be interpreted. I would say the fault lies with all of us of not resisting certain provisions like this, or not even assisting properly to the Supreme Court as to what is the correct state of affairs. If you carefully read the provisions or carefully read the decision of the Supreme Court, nowhere there is a mention that on 1st of February, this Act 148, Section 147, 148, 149 has been totally overruled. That they never brought it to the notice. So, in such a situation, was Supreme Court right in saying that this provision, which is Supreme Court mentions in para 6 of the decision, that these are Finance Act 21 has introduced radical and reformative changes governing the procedure of reassessment proceedings. Now, look at these reformist provisions and the way it has been interpreted by the CBDT, which has been circulated to tax officers. So, therefore, this really creates anguish among the taxpayers as the honest citizens of the country as to what is it happening. Are we to take it for, are the taxpayer is being taken for granted for all these purposes, and therefore they can do everything and they are allowed to get escape from the highest court by regularizing whatever they have done under bona fide belief, so-called bona fide belief. Their interpretation has been accepted as a correct interpretation and they have been given leeway to complete this. Now, therefore, we as a citizen, I think, has a much bigger role. We as a tax professional has a big role, and we ultimately as a members of the Chartered Accountant, which is the highest body, as our chairman, vice chairman mentioned, that is our responsibility to bring to the notice what is something not happening properly and what is going wrong. I think that's the role institute and all of us need to play for the purpose of this correcting whatever is the non-correct things which are happening. Now, with this brief background of the provisions, let the provisions are and how these provisions are being interpreted by the courts. Now, we will now let's read the provisions, what were there earlier and what has happened. Earlier provisions relating to 1961 Act were under section 147, 148 and 149. Before any notice was issued, assessing officer had to record reasons in writing that he believes that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment for the reason that assessee has not disclosed fully and truly all material facts what was necessary for the purpose of determination of income. There were several litigations going on, and if we get the total count, according to me, 80 to 90% of cases, department had lost the cases because the reasons recorded were not appropriate reasons to justify that there was a failure on the part of the assessee to disclose truly and correctly the returns, correctly the facts of his case. Therefore, under the guise of avoiding so-called litigation or reducing the litigation, these amendments were carried out. Now, but we always have to keep in mind as to what is the purpose of section 147, what it is getting covered, what is getting covered, and what is not sought to be covered. Now, before we go into the comparison, let's see what the section 147 says, and which has no change except minor change. If any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, subject to the provisions of section 148 to 153, he can assess or reassess such income. So the fundamental principle to be kept in mind is, if any income has escaped assessment, and then it has to be subject to the completion of the provisions of section 148 to 153. Explanation to section 147 says, once case is validly reopened, any issue which has escaped assessment and such other issues which comes to his notice subsequently during the course of proceedings, in the course of such proceedings, can be also considered in the reassessment. So that is 147. Now, let's consider what is the new regime says so. Before coming to new regime of 22, I will just like to touch upon old provision, what was there, and then go to the new provision. Now, old regime and new regime, has a peculiarity and which we need to keep in mind. If we see this process flow chart, which is as per amended in section 1 by amendment 22, it says new procedure under section 148A, which is a faceless process. So AO can conduct inquiry if required with the approval of the specified authority. Assessee has to reply within 7 to 30 days or such extended time. And thereafter, AO has to pass an order under section 148D with the superior authority's prior approval within 1 month from the end of the month in which taxpayer has replied. That means before starting of a reassessment, he has to satisfy 148A conditions which are prescribed. If AO decides to reopen, then he goes further and then he issues the notice under 148. Samirji, can you just put off your video? Samirji or Giriji, who is, I think video is on. Can you just put it off? It is distracting. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Then once the notice is issued, then the new time limit starts. And as per the new time limit, AO has in possession of books of accounts or any of the documents to reveal that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. Then he can issue the notice within the period of 3 years. And if the provision as per 21 Act was prevailing, if it was income was escaping assessment was more than 50 lakhs, which is represented by the asset, then he could reopen for the period of 10 years. So that is the way provisions are. And thereafter he has to proceed with the proceedings. Now, the interesting part is in 22 Act, which will come to a little later. Now, before we go to the detailed provisions of 28 and what was the changes made, I'd like to just touch upon the provisions of section 148, which is very important for this purpose. Section 148 says, AO before issuing notice under section 148A shall conduct inquiry with the previous approval of a specified authority. So there was 2-layer approvals were required. So that is what is required to be done, which we saw just now. Provide opportunity to show cause why notice under section 148 should not be issued. That was a show cause notice. That was a good provision. Consider the reply received and then decide on the basis of material on the record, including reply received from the SSC, whether it's a fit case to issue notice under section 148. And he has to do it within 1 month's time from the end of the month in which reply is received. So this is 148. Now, let's go back to 148 and see what the provision is. Earlier, notices were directly issued. This was prior to 31st March 21. Directly notices were issued by the assessing officer informing that your case has been reopened. But then if he finds that there is no material, nothing is surviving, then he should drop the proceedings. But proceedings were directly initiated. After the now 21 Act, as we saw, AO is supposed to issue notice under 148A after obtaining necessary approval. The interesting part is, no notice can be issued unless there is a information with the AO that suggests that income chargeable tax has escaped assessment for the relevant assessment year, and he has also obtained the power approval of specified authority. Why I am emphasizing this again and again is because if you see, it proviso reassures there has to be information in the possession of the AO to suggest that income chargeable has escaped assessment. It is not only on the basis of just belief, but he has to have some concrete information in his possession that has to be seen. Now, interesting part starts from here. Now, what is the information which could be seen by officer to reopen the assessment is prescribed in explanation 1 to section 148. Now, what is the information? What I'm referring to 21 Act because when we have to deal with Supreme Court decision, we'll touch upon more on the 21 Act. What it says is, any information flagged in case of assessee for the relevant assessment year in accordance with the risk management strategy formulated by the board from time to time. Note the word any information flagged in the case of assessee for relevant assessment year in accordance with the risk management strategy. This is very, very essential because this has been completely diluted in the later part, which will come to in 22, will come to that. Second criteria was any final objection. Final objection, note the words, final objection raised by CNAG to the effect that assessment in the case of assessee for relevant assessment year is not in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Now, these are the two important points which we are reading from the screen. Now, what has happened is the whole issue which we need to consider. When the provisions were brought in 21, all of us felt that it has implications and very wide power is given to the assessing officer, even though subject to prior approval of specified authority. But again, as we are all aware, when we are talking about specified authority, approval of specified authority, most of the cases it was the mechanical approvals. We have seen several cases and several cases of the courts wherein it was pointed out to the court that look at the approvals given by the specified authority or higher authority or so-called principal CIT. The order is prepared by the officer on the same page. There is a type by the officer himself that approval is granted and he will barely sign there. If that is the way of mechanical approval is given, how could it be said that this officer, the senior officer, specified authority has applied its mind properly before granting approval, or it is only simple mechanical approval? Now, this was a position which was the situation. Now, let's come to what was the circular of the CBDT under 2010-12-2021. Now, the so-called instructions to the subordinate officers deals with various things, and we'll touch upon that particular various things in this case. Before that, we'll also just touch upon explanation 2 to section 148, which deals with more search and seizure cases. What will be the criteria for the reopening of those cases, or what is the information in possession of the officer which could be used by him for the purpose of search seizure, which is specified in the explanation 2, which says in case of assessee, note this word, in case of assessee or third person after 1/4/21, where there is a search or survey and where AO is satisfied with the previous approval of PCIT or CIT, and in case assets seized in the books or documents or information pertains to assessee, then it can be reopened. Now, note the words again and again. It could be search in his own case, survey could be in own case, it could be survey or search in case of third person. That such third person, if there is a name or information or any entry or anything is found or document found with the third person which contains the name or information about the assessee, then this case also could be reopened. Now, let's come to what is it meant by, what is it clarified, or what is the instructions given by CBDT, how to interpret provisions of section 2021, reassessment provision of 2021, and what is it information which is to be considered by them. And interesting part starts from here. As we have seen, as it is available on the screen, there were only two things which meant to cover that what is information available or what is the way he has to find out the information. That is one, it is the information of taxpayer in accordance with the risk management. Important. I will come to that a little later. It has to be flagged information in the case of SSC, as per the risk management strategy decided by the CBDT. Second was final audit objection. Final audit objection, not of internal audit, not of a revenue audit, but CAG, Controller and Auditor General of India. Only those two cases were permitted to be reopened. But look at the audacity of the CBDT to interpret these provisions, and what did they say? It says how to do the provisions, how to find out the information, and what is the way risk management strategy to be worked out. It says what is to be done. It talks of uploading on verification report, upload called VRU, functionally on Insight portal. This is what the circular says. When we carefully analyze what is it circular says as to what officers should follow is about the information. I will just narrate the few points after that circular or instructions to understand what extent department had gone to interpret the provisions or to read the two provisions. Now what it was? Information from government or law enforcement agencies, from income tax authority, including assessing officer himself. Now, does that mean that there is some information available with assessing officer which he has not used, what he wants now to use? The second point, information available in FT and TR, government records, FT and TR. Third, information arising from the search and seizure action. Again, whose case not known. Though we have the main explanation itself says that whose case it was to be seen. Information arising out of the order of the court, appellate order, NCLT, or order under section 263 or 264, having impact on the income of the assessee's case or in case of any other assessee. Now, why we are a little disturbed with the circular was all these points were not mentioned or not mentioned in the Income Tax Act section 148 provision. Income Tax Act provision contain only two subclauses. That is in the explanation 1 and 2. And then the explanation 2 talks about search seizure cases. There is no dispute what is to be done in search seizure cases, that's a separate matter. But when it comes to the normal cases, is the what is sought to be mentioned in the circular, does it give that power to the tax department or CBDT to issue such instruction to officer which is not prescribed in the Act? Now, if the Act says you need to see what is the flagged information as per the risk management strategy. Now, if that is the issue, where is the question of all these cases which are elaborated or what is the listed in the instruction? Now, is it permitted? Does it mean that anything which is they feel appropriate, they can put it by our instructions and increase the scope and increase the litigation? Second point, and another interesting point is, says information available as per internal audit. They say internal audit. Now we have seen the provision in the Act says only final audit report of CAG. Now the instruction says even internal audit information is the information available. Now where do you go this? If the Act doesn't permit you to go beyond CAG, how come this internal audit came here in the instructions? And the question goes further. Then it goes further. If there is any recurring issue going on in the litigation, and if there is an order of any tribunal or the court, and if the stakes involved are more than 25 lakhs or 10 lakhs, or in case of TP cases 10 crore rupees, then they can treat the information for other years as pending and they can reopen the assessments. So look at the situation what we are going into, and this is what exactly has triggered. My impression is that 90,000 cases are after this December circular of CBDT. The way CBDT has interpreted these two clauses, sub-clauses which were there, not the all 5 clauses which I have referred to in 22 Act, which will come to a little later. How could they have issued this? And this is what department get more enthusiastic to issue such 90,000 notices. And that again, we are not aware what the notices were issued up to 31st March. As I mentioned, Supreme Court only mentions about the notices issued after 1st of April 2021 to 31st to 30th of June 2021. And that has been regularized by the Supreme Court. Now, if this is the way you interpret the provision, what is the sanctity of the Income Tax Act provisions if you want to rewrite the Act by interpreting or issuing instructions to the officer? Please proceed on this. Don't worry about what is the Income Tax Act. Is that the way Act could be interpreted? If the Finance Minister says we are here to simplify the law, make the law simpler, how could do this in issue saying that no, don't bother about this, what is mentioned in the Act. You examine all the 6 conditions, and if it is there, you go and issue the notices. And this is also after supposed to be approval of principal CCIT or principal CIT. If that is the situation, is this 90,000 notices have been issued after a due process of law, after the due approvals? As we are aware, even under the old law, prior to 147, there were approvals required to be taken at appropriate level. And beyond 4 years, it had to be approval by commissioner. So, all these cases, how does it work? So, therefore, I am aghast to see how this could happen. Interesting part, again, is in this circular, same instruction. They say, please verify the instructions, please verify this information, particularly for assessment year 15-16 and 18-19, which may require action, immediate action. This is a December 21 instruction. Why 15-16? Because 15-16, 6 years were getting completed, or 6 years were completed by March 22. And why the significance of that proviso, I'll come to a little later. That has a very interesting facets of the matter. And 18-19. Why 18-19? Because 3 years are getting completed by March 22. So, these instructions were issued in December 21 to the all officer. Please check the 15-16 assessment records, 18-19 records, and find out on the basis of their interpretation of the Income Tax Act, as they did 148, with this all the 6 or 7 parameters. And if you find that there is information that these cases need to be reopened, please reopen the cases. Now, this is exactly what has happened, which led to several cases being filed challenging. One, for the notices issued before 31st of March 2021, and thereafter notices issued after 1st April to 30th June 2021. So, spate of writ petitions have been filed challenging the validity as not being complied with. And therefore, various courts came very heavily on the department of not complying with any of the provisions which are prescribed in the Act, and they struck down a lot of cases even before this matter of validity of notices issued after 1st April 21 came in. So therefore, our feel is tax department, that is CBDT, has taken on themselves to rewrite the income tax law when there was not there, and extended the scope to issue the notices in all those cases. Now, is it for simplification of law? Is it for the purpose of reducing the litigation? Is it for unsettling the settled law for decades together? And what have you done there? in issuing instructions which patently are contrary to the law. If the law itself has restricted the scope, what should be meant by information available, you can't extend by the instruction, please look into this and issue the notices. How could you do that? The irony of this is, the amendment has been made in 22 Act, bringing in all these points in the Amendment Act. Now, that's the worst part which is happening. Now, you promise to the taxpayer of the country, honest citizen of the country, that I am protecting your interest by reducing the powers of the officer to issue the cases, reopen the cases for so many years. He will have only limited option to reopen when he can reopen. That is only these two criteria. One is flagged information as per the risk management strategy, or final audit objection of CAG. That is given go by. Now that has been brought in, 5 conditions have been brought in, which I would like to read, and which is what is problem. And this is what, when we compare the circular of 21, instruction of 21 vis-a-vis this provision, we find that most of the points what are mentioned in the instructions have been brought in by of the Act. Now, is it that it has been shown to the finance minister that this is what was there last year, this is a promise we have made to the nation, this is the promise made to the taxpayer. However, we are giving go by to all this, and we are extending the scope for what is meant by information by incorporating the 5 clauses. Always I just feel very interesting to hear some of the bureaucrats, very senior bureaucrats. Recently, one of the seminar, I was in the on the panel wherein Montek Singh Ahluwalia, which most of you must be aware, he was a former deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, so-called now Niti Aayog Planning Commission, was also dais. I was mentioning about several retrospective amendments, retroactive amendments made, because finance minister has been every time saying that we are not doing any retroactive. We pointed out, then I was pointing out to the on the seminar that 80% of last year's amendment were retroactive amendments. Retroactive in the when you pass the provision on 1st of February 21 or 22 with retrospective effect from 1st April of last year, that is 21. Provision gets passed in the month of March 2022, but effective from 1st April 21. So I was pointing out, if you look at the way, we have several criticisms made earlier in respect of the amendments made in Vodafone amendment were 2012 amendments, which was heavily criticized. Government got severely humiliated, and finally they had to withdraw that. After 10 years, they had to withdraw those retrospective amendments. I said, that is the fate of the cases. Then why is the government doing, in the pretext of saying that we will not carry out any retrospective amendment, why they are doing this amendment again? So, as I said, 80% of the amendments of last 2 years have been retroactive amendments. They are saying they're not retrospective but retroactive. In a way, it goes back to the 1 year. So when the transactions of that are completed, suppose I have carried out the transaction between 1st April 2021 to 31st March 22, when the act was of 21 Act, now 22 Act says, no, I am changing the law from 1st April 21. So that means after my transactions business is over of that year, you amend the law from earlier date, which is called retroactive. So Montek Singh laughingly said, he said that is the secret which we learned from Britishers. He says, when we have to take permission of the, because theoretically we have to show everything to the finance minister before she presents the budget in the parliament, or before she moves, or he or she moves the amendment to the Finance Act. So what is a finance bill? So what he said is, we go and show only limited information to them, and generally they don't have time, neither they will be have that grasp to understand what the changes are being proposed by, and we quietly say that yes, this is the 5 amendments we are moving, and this is one amendment. They will show one amendment. By the time they go through the second, third, finance minister will not have time, neither patience to go through all this technicalities. They say, okay, you have seen it properly, yes, fine, go ahead and do it. Exactly same thing has happened this year. That is why you will find when this amendment was made in 148, which was the fundamental for last year, fundamental principle for the last year, has been completely given go by. So that is exactly, therefore, you don't find any mention of these amendments in the finance minister's speech of this year. Probably she was not even briefed. This is what is the changes we are fundamentally we are changing the all what you promised last year, and this is what exactly has happened. Now let's look to the what is done. Now information risk management strategy. Earlier it was a flagged information. I am saying why that flagged information has very essential criteria. Welcome, Shekhar. Welcome to
Thank you.
you seem to be airport only, still in the airport.
Yeah, I am hopping. I am at Kolkata. I'll be leaving soon.
Welcome.
Please continue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was earlier meant to be was to be flagged information. What does that mean, flagged? Flagged information in case of assessee. So it has to be that the information, which is risk management strategy information, which is available to that CBDT, has to be flagged in the case of assessee. So the name or information has to be linked to the assessee's case, which leads to the escapement of income. Let's take a few cases. What could become under flag? Suppose there is a case of a bogus purchases cases, which is what has been talked by officials of the CBDT, bogus purchase cases. Then there is a bogus share cases, where the bogus share transactions have been carried out and where the capital gains income has been booked. To those cases. In that case, they will announce that this is the company which is a bogus company and these are the shareholders in which your name as a flagged person will be there. Similarly, in case of bogus purchases cases, they will announce the name of the purchaser and seller where your names will be there. And that's called flagged information. And flagged in the case of assessee. That is what is important, flagged in the case of assessee. Now, what is the change made? Look at this. Information in the taxpayer's case for assessment year accordance with the risk management strategy formulated by CBDT. Now, what do we mean out of this? What do we inform for this? Your name need not be connected to this. If there is any information saying that some bogus purchases cases are happening, and if there is somebody name is already flagged in, and he says, I have sold some shares, purchases from that person, or I have bought the shares of that company, all those cases will get linked to as per this information strategy. Your name need not be flagged because that is gone now. Now, second case, second amendment. Any audit objection in the case of assessee. Now, note the difference in the word. Earlier, it was a final audit objection issued by CNAG. Those who are, at least most of us are familiar how the departmental audit takes place. It has a series of steps to be taken. There could be internal audit, there could be revenue audit, there could be CAG audit. And what is final CAG audit is, after back and forth of queries raised by this audit, replies given by the department, replies given by SSE, and once they formulate, no, this is the transaction which has escaped assessment, then they will flag they will make that as a final audit objection, which goes right up to the parliament. Final audit objection of CAG goes up to final there. But that's not the case of internal audit. That's not the case of a revenue audit. These are all internal, which is happening around between the department, taxpayer, and assessing officer. Audit, department, and taxpayer. So now that is done away with. So there is now no more CAG. It is done only audit objection. So that it could be any audit objection, which is what I was saying. This was part of the departmental instructions, which has been now got amended, made the act amendment on that basis. Now, third, information received from foreign jurisdiction under agreement under entered into treaties 90 and 91. Fine. I have no objection. No, this if such information comes, you should consider it. But according to me, under existing clause, under risk management strategy, this could have been specifically covered, and there was no risk for anybody to doubt or debate about it. But anyway, they have specified, there's no doubt about it. Information received under the schemes notified under 153A, dealing with the information collected by the tax authorities electronically. What is this information? Is a faceless collection of the information which is getting collected, tons of information which is get collected. That information is now valid as a information for the purpose of 148. That is important. I think that is what is crucial we need to do. Now, fifth point, any information requiring action in consequence of the tribunal or court order. Again, I have serious reservation about this wording. Compared to the circular, this provision has been far widely drafted here in the Act now. Now, it could be ordered in anybody else's cases. It could be any other tribunal cases. It is not necessarily that it has to be related to my case, which tribunal High Court has given direction that should be considered here. That is not there. So, if you look to all these amendments, virtually the whole concept of information has been rewritten in the 1922 Act. 2022 Act. So therefore, the finality which we are thinking of, or revolutionary provision which we are thinking of, has now completely diluted down in the favor of the tax, against the taxpayer, in the favor of the tax department, so that they will never lose in any of the matters. And this is what exactly has happened. So therefore, we need to really wonder what is happening and what is need to be considered. Now coming to the interesting aspect about 149. This is as far as the notices are concerned. And this is very interesting and that needs a lot of attention, because a lot of cases when we go to the case studies we'll find will be either valid or invalid if their conditions are not satisfied. Now look at the conditions. What it says, time limit to issue notice is normally 3 years. This is what I am talking about. 22 and 21 will mix up the two transactions for this purpose and then we'll come back to. Beyond 3 years, up to 3 years, there has to be assessing officer has to have possession, books of accounts or documents, evidence which reveal that income represented in the following form exceeds rupees 50 lakhs, which has escaped assessment. Earlier, it was only in the form of an asset. There was no other asset, and there was a condition that 50 lakhs escapement of income has to be of a year. And that now has been changed in a different way. Now what it says, up to 3 years, anyway, you can reopen any cases if you have the information as per the extended definition of 148. And now what is included, not only in the form of asset, but expenditure in relation to the transaction, expenditure in relation to the event or occasion, or entry or entries in the books of accounts. Again, there, if the income escape assessment is more than one previous year, notice shall be issued for each of the assessment year. Now let's the case that again that has a very interesting significance I will just touch upon. Earlier, as I was mentioning, that in order to extend the limit from 3 years to 10 years, there has to be escapement of income which is represented by an asset. It has to be representing in the physical asset as specified in the Act itself. And if it is not represented by asset, case could not go up for reopening up to 10 years. What is the 50 lakhs? 50 lakhs per year. Escapement had to be 50 lakhs per year, which is what I read out to Finance Minister's speech. She mentions in paragraph 154 of her speech that this is, I am expecting it to open only when there are 50 lakhs per year. Now that is completely given go by. Can anybody explain why this is the complete drastic change? Now that is part one. Now second part, even the expenditure incurred. If there is any escaped income, expenditure in relation to the transaction. Suppose let's take a case, there is an unexplained expenditure incurred, like suppose marriage or event. So that was not creating an asset. So now that is sought to be covered by this. But again, 50 lakhs has to be seen overall period of 10 years. And which is escapement of 50 lakhs now or likely to be there looking into the transactions of 10 years, which is the proviso says so. That is what exactly said. When income is escaping assessment in more than one previous year, and he feels that income is likely to be spread in the other years, he can extend it to that year, so that goes to 10 years. And therefore, the 50 lakhs limit is not for 1 year, 50 lakhs limit is for the entire period of 10 years. So that's a fundamental change made to 21 Act. So therefore, scope extended to such a wide extent by two amendments. One is 148 amendment, which I reasons for collecting information or basis of information is extended considerably, and the scope of extending the case to 3 years to 10 years has been completely overhauled, and so possibly, according to me, each and every case which they see that there is an escapement of income will get covered in this. Because he has only to establish that is only likely to exceed 50 lakhs. He doesn't have to establish there is 50 lakhs. Earlier the condition was he had to establish for 1 year. Now it is not so. Now he has a proviso available. It is likely to exceed. So he has very well essentially he can go ahead of anything what he can do and reopen the cases. So with all due respect to the Supreme Court with a passionate appeal, and I have heard from those who appeared in the cases, very passionate appeal made to the judges to look at this. If you invalidate these notices, 90,000 cases will go scot-free, and huge amount of income which is escaped assessment will go scot-free, and which is what is reproduced in the Supreme Court's decision. Look at the audacity of the persons who are arguing before the court and supposed to be assisting court or guide the court. Is it a way to assist the court? Tell them what is the amendment made in 22, because that will have implications. Virtually everything has been now getting sought to be reversed completely. So-called revolutionary law has been now completely diluted in the favor of the department. So they can do everything what they want to do by this satisfying the conditions, which is 148 and 149, and easily. So virtually, contrary to promise given or mentioned by the finance minister that time limit has been reduced, according to me, most of the cases time limit will be increased. Take it from me, time limit will be increased, subject to the certain cases where we will find that 6 years time limit will be kick in, which will come to little later, which is the proviso to 149. So as we discussed, very, very serious implications are happening by the amendment to 22 to the act, which was so-called rational provision to reduce litigation and reduce the power of the taxpayers. That has been completely overhauled by 22, by whatever their officers felt that there were difficulties faced by them to reopen. That has all been amended, and which was the instructions which is now been made legislated in the form of amendment to the act, which according to me is very, very bad for the taxpayers, bad for the country, and for the what we call it ease of doing business or non-adversarial tax regime. How is it ease of doing business? What is the non-adversarial? You are keeping everything instead of 6 years now, you are going to reopen the cases for 10 years and keeping hanging sword on my head that what some transaction they will find in year X year, then there is no, according to me, it is likely to increase more than 50 lakhs rupees, so I can go up to 10 years. Which is what is the cause of worry and uncertainty what is going to create in the taxpayers' minds. So therefore, this need to be kept very much in the mind. Now, let's come to the time limit of 6 years before we go to the actual example. This is what we discussed, so I don't want to delve in this. We'll come back to this slide a little earlier. Now I'll just touch upon the proviso to section 149, which is again a very interesting proviso. Now proviso to section 149 has a very important aspect. Proviso says, if as on 1st of April 21, certain cases are getting time barred, then the revised time limit prescribed cannot be used. I'll explain the case. I'll explain the matter. Let's take a case. If as on 1st of April 21, certain cases were getting time barred as per the old law, which was prescribed in section 149(1)(b), which says that time limit for reopening under old law was 4 years or maximum 6 years. So 6 years comes from that period. That is 149(1)(b). Now, as per that provision, and as per the proviso which is there on the statute, which is helpful to us, it says the period of 10 years can't be applied if as per your existing provision, that assessment was getting time barred as per the old law as on 1/4/21. So let us take a case. Assessment year 14-15 has become time barred on 1/4/21. So therefore, under the new law of 21 law, assessee cannot be, that case cannot be reopened for him. As on 1/4/22, assessment for 15-16 has become time barred. So therefore, irrespective of the income escaping assessment, if it is related to 14-15 or 15-16, now after 1/4/22, the cases cannot be reopened. But that's the assurance given by the proviso. And proviso says, if on a particular date before issuing notice, under old law, if that time limit, as per the time limit kicked in, that will become time barred. So therefore, you cannot extend the scope for 10 years for these cases. Why I say so? Because there is a lot of confusion created in the various circulars, which I'll deal with little later. The circulars say that there is a time limit of 15-16 or 14-15. That is a confusion created in the circular of 11th May 2022 while interpreting Supreme Court decision. Now let's consider the proviso. This proviso is to, under 149, is proviso to both the section, both the sub clauses, that is 3 years and 10 years. When 3 years is normal clause and 10 years is normal clause. This proviso has been brought in 21 Act, and it clearly says that it is applicable to both the sub clauses. It doesn't say only for the purpose of 1 or 2, it says entire section. So therefore, my personal opinion, those cases of assessment year 14-15 have become time barred on 31st March 21, and after 1/4/21, no notice could be issued for such cases. Again, assessment year 15-16 has become time barred on 31/3/22. So no notices for 15-16 can be issued under after 1/4/22 for assessment year 15-16, irrespective of income, whether it is less than 50 lakhs or above 50 lakhs. So therefore, if we are not able to issue notices, the question of income escaping assessment more than 50 lakhs, less than 50 lakhs does not apply. All those you can do, department can do, is only for the period of 6 years, and that's the upper limit. Because if that some case is becoming time barred earlier years, they have the time limit to do everything for future. But for the past, at least that is the protection so far available. I always say so far available, because the way amendments are carried out retroactively, anything can happen in our country. This is what exactly can happen. But as of now, and which has been admitted, which is what I said that when we were referring to the circular also clearly mentioned, please process your cases for 14-15 reopening quickly, information quickly. For 18-19 again, do it quickly, because then once the cases get time barred, you will not be able to use this amended provision also. Even though 22 Act has given some more liberalization to them, according to me, this proviso has not been disturbed. Therefore, 15-16 cases as of 31st March 22 have become time barred, and then nothing can be done, even though income more than 50 lakhs has escaped assessment. Another interesting point to be kept in mind is, if you recollect, under old law, in case of a non-resident, in case of a resident having overseas income or overseas assets, then the cases could be reopened up to 16 years. That provision has been completely deleted. So therefore, irrespective of whatever is the income found out in the foreign country of a resident in India, that cases cannot be reopened for 16 years, but it can be reopened only up to 6 years or 10 years or 3 years, depending upon where we fall, whether we fall in main explanation 149 or we fall in explanation the proviso to section 149, and whether we will get out in 6 years' time. So therefore, that's a silver lining of this, at least for the overseas assets. That's the silver lining which is available to us. Therefore, we need to be very careful. We need to be very agile to find out notice is for what period, notice is what is the contents mentioned in notice. Have they given opportunity to you to explain the matter as per section 148, 148A, and have they given the opportunity to you to respond? And after considering that, have they reopened the case after the submission of my reply within the period of 30 days from the end of the month in which the notice is issued? Reply has been filed back. So, therefore, the protection which is there need to be carefully looked into so as to ensure that rampant reopening does not happen and you don't get victimized for that purpose. Therefore, you need to be extra careful, and particularly since many of our friends are from the Mofussil area, like Nanded and Sholapur and Pune and everywhere. I won't call Pune as a Mofussil area, but there are many other smaller places in the at least Maharashtra I am aware, other places also must be there, where this type of rampant actions have been taken by the tax officials, which many times gets unattended by our consultants properly or their local ITBs properly. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the educated class like chartered accountants to guide them properly to see that these are the implications of this Amendment Act. Therefore, we need to be very, very cautious, very, very clear that these are the provisions we need to be carefully looked into on the time barring cases. Now I'll come to, before I go to the Supreme Court decision, the two circulars. Sorry, I will touch upon the circulars only when we come to Supreme Court decision. But I'm saying all of you need to read the circular of December 11 in the context of which I referred to, and that has a very interesting aspect which you need to keep in mind. So therefore, keeping this in mind, what we have discussed just now is reopening of the cases need to be very, very carefully seen, as whether it is as per 21 Act or whether it is 22 Act. Fortunately for 22 Act, there are not many, 22 Act of 148 and 149 are not retrospective and they are prospective. So therefore, any amendments which are made in 22 Act will not have a retrospective or clarificatory or a clarificatory implication, and those explanations or extension of scope which is done in 22 Act will not apply to the cases reopened as per 21 Act. So therefore, that is between 1/4/21 to 31st/3/22, that will not apply because new provisions are becoming applicable only from 1/4/22. So therefore, whatever extended scope what we read in 148, whatever extended scope we see on 149, it is only for the prospective and not for the retrospective cases what is there. With this, I will now move to the Supreme Court decision, and then we will come back to, if need be, as to what are the implications of this mix-up of these two provisions, 21 and 22. This I am not going through. You can go through at leisure. There are lots of issues and points have been raised, which we'll deal with when we do the case study once we finish Supreme Court analysis of the Supreme Court decision. Because that is the interesting part of Supreme Court, and implications of Supreme Court decision are far-reaching, so we need to look into. Now, this is an interesting case of Ashish Agarwal. As in the beginning I was referring to, that reopening was triggered from December 21 after CBDT gave instructions to their officers, please verify all the information, whether there is an escapement of income, and as I mentioned in detail, much elaborately than what was there in the section itself, and informed their officers, guided their officers to start processing and reopening the cases. Again, as I said, we don't have statistics available as to what are the number of cases reopened between December and March 21, which were supposed to be under the old act, because the new act came into force only from 1/4/21. So therefore, under the old provisions of 147, all these notices had to be issued. When the notices were issued under the old act, they had to satisfy the conditions of reason to believe, reasons recorded in writing, and there is a failure on the part of the taxpayer to disclose his income fully and truly. If that is the situation, then notice is issued during this period up to March 21, that is, whether those notices were valid or not valid had to be tested under the old law. The new notices under TOLA have been issued after 1st of April 21, but before 30th of June 21, under the bona fide belief of the so-called bona fide belief of the tax officers that they had extended time to issue the notices. There were a host of litigations filed. As per assessing officers, they had a time to issue these notices, so they have got extension of time to issue the notices up to 30th of June 21 in respect of the old assessments as per old section 147. Keep this in mind. So they had to issue notices, satisfy the test mentioned under the old law up to 31st March 21, because new act triggered only from 1/4/21. But they took a privilege, they took a whatever calculated risk or bona fide belief and issued the notices. And as per Supreme Court's calculation, there are 90,000 cases. Notices were issued after 1st April 21 up to 30th June 21. And all those cases were supposed to be under old act, under the old law. All these notices, and at least the Supreme Court order says, out of which 9,000 cases were filed in various courts, and out of which majority of the cases, except for the, I think, Jharkhand High Court, all other high courts, Chhattisgarh High Court, all other high courts struck down the notices, saying that these are bad in law because TOLA has not extended the period for reopening of cases beyond 31st March 21. If it is a reopening had to be done, you have to issue notice before 31st March 21. So matter came up before various high court, and high courts struck down the notice. The interesting part, what all these courts have said is interesting to read. High Court said that we are squashing these notices. However, important point what they left it to them was, you can proceed to issue the notices to the taxpayer under the new law. So what Supreme Court said was, what various High Court said was, I will just read one paragraph of the last decision of Allahabad High Court decision, which is what is crucial for our discussion. And what did Supreme Court do on that, and what are likely to be implications of that? I will read one Allahabad High Court decision in case of same Ashok Agarwal, Ashish Agarwal, and after squashing the notices, what did Supreme Court say? What did the Allahabad High Court say? In view of the above, all writ petitions must succeed and allowed. It is declared that the ordinance enabling the TOLA enforced on 1/4 as enforced with effect from 1/4/21 are not conflicted. Insofar as explanation to so and so, import notice so and so are concerned, we declare the said explanation must be read as applicable to the reassessment proceedings as has been seen in 31st March 21 before substitution of the new provisions. Consequently, reassessment notices in all writ petitions are quashed. It is left open to the respective assessing authorities to initiate the reassessment proceedings in accordance with the provisions of the Act as amended by Finance Act 21 after making all compliances as required by the law. Please note, Supreme Court, all other high courts only squash the notices which are under the old law. They say, but you are free to do, if time limit permits you, to start proceedings as per section 148A read with 148 and 149. Means you issue notice after 1st April 21, but follow the conditions prescribed in section 148A. So that became very, very crucial. So again, the Supreme Court did not struck down the provisions. Supreme Court did not say that you can't do anything with these cases. All this court did not say that I'm cancelling everything, but they left open to the all officers to proceed under the new law. Why were they so scared to go under the new law? I really can't understand. They had to only simply satisfy that they are complying with the provisions of 148A. They are complying with section 148 conditions which are flagged risk management strategy condition as well as the CAG audit, and then they have to get the time of 3 to 10 years. I do not know what was the so much scare for the department and why was the Revenues Council made so passionate appeal to the Supreme Court. Look at this, 90,000 cases are getting out of our hands which were issued between April and June. Therefore, please permit us to do something. And then the Supreme Court got, I think, with passionate appeal that so much lakhs of crores of rupees revenue is getting lost. Supreme Court must have felt that there is, as per the representation made by the department or department council, this is what has happened. So they permitted. Now, what the Supreme Court do is a very interesting part. Now, Supreme Court says, and which is interesting to read, and the way Supreme Court says, to strike a balance on the rights of the revenue as well as respective assessees because of bona fide belief of officers of the revenue issuing 90,000 such notices, revenue may not suffer as ultimately it is public exchequer which would suffer. Keep that in mind, wordings, very important wording. Now, if it has done so by modifying the judgment of the order passed by Allahabad High Court as under wise, also extending the applicability of Pan-India, its application to Pan-India for all writ petitions pending of the High Court as on the under Article 142. As all of us are aware, Article 142 gives a very, very extended power to the Supreme Court to enforce certain decisions all over India on its own. Now, only one condition which we need to read, 148, and what circumstances Supreme Court has extended this for any other tax matters. It says, Supreme Court in exercise of jurisdiction may pass such decree. I am reading Article 142 of the Constitution. Supreme Court in exercise of the jurisdiction may pass such decree or make such order as is necessary for doing complete justice in any cause or matter pending before it, and may decree so passed or made shall be enforceable throughout the territory of India in such manner as may be prescribed by or under the law made by the Parliament, and until the provisions of that on behalf of is made in such manner as President may by order preside. Now, such extended power which is given to the Supreme Court has been used for so-called bona fide mistake of the tax by the tax officials to issue the notices before 31st of March 2021. Now, what are the implications? I think let's read the order, the summary of the order, and then go to the implications. I only wonder if there are 90,000 as taxpayers had made such mistake, would they have Supreme Court had the same sympathetic approach for these 90,000 cases? Or is it only because it is the government and ultimately, as Supreme Court says, revenue may not suffer, but ultimately it is the public exchequer which would suffer? Now, in all this process, and once we finish the analysis of Supreme Court, we'll realize the whole litigation, the amount of litigation which is going to happen is not only going to get department any revenue. On the contrary, it will only end up in 100 minimum 2 lakh cases. I'm saying double the cases of 90,000 litigation going on, and so many cases going on. Already my junior colleagues is showing that there's already similar writ petitions have started already coming in the various high courts, and one of the cases come before the Rajasthan High Court on 20th, and they have passed an interim order saying that they will hear finally on some 6th of July or something, 4th of July. So therefore, already challenge of implementation of the Supreme Court's order has started. And therefore, it is going to be a huge litigation. But let's understand Supreme Court decision before we see the implications of the Supreme Court. The impugned section 148 issued to the respective assessees which were issued under unamended section 148 of the Act, which were subject matter of writ petitions before the various respective high courts, shall be deemed to have been issued. Note this word, shall be deemed to have been issued under section 148 of the Act as substituted by the Finance Act 21 and construed or treated to be show cause notices in terms of section 148AB. The assessing officer within 30 days from the today provide to the respective assessees information and material relied upon by the revenue so that assessee can reply to the show cause notice within 2 weeks thereafter. I'll just read the conclusion and come back to this because there is a lot of things to interpret from this provision. It has a lot of analysis to be done. Subclause 2. Requirement of conducting inquiry, if any, required with the prior approval of a specified authority under section is hereby dispensed with. So there is no prior approval which was required, that has been dispensed with by the order of the Supreme Court with the passionate appeal by the department. Third, assessing officer shall thereafter pass the order under section 148AD in respect of the concerned assessee, thereafter after following the procedure as required in section 148 as substituted. All defences, this is important, all defences which may be available to the assessee, including those available under section 149 of the IT Act, and all rights and contentions which may be available to the concerned assessees and the revenue under the Act of 2021 and in law shall continue to be available. Note this word, the contentions to the assessee and revenue are only as per Finance Act 21 and law shall continue to be, the remedies which are available there shall continue to be available. So 149 has been specifically dealt with, which has a lot of significance which we'll deal with. Now I'll just analyze this 1, 2, 3, 4 paras of the Supreme Court order. First, it says notices issued under the old section 148 will be deemed to be notices issued under 148A and construed or treated as to be show cause notices in terms of section 148AB. Supreme Court does not say, note the words, my impression of the decision is, Supreme Court does not say that all notices will be deemed to be valid notices. Notices are not been validated. Notices only are to be treated as notices issued under the new Act. So the department doesn't have to issue another 90,000 notices. They don't have to go to the procedures. But the notices validity has to be seen based on what is the material in possession of the taxpayer with the department, which is what is mentioned in the next sentence. And construed to be treated as show cause notice in terms of 148AB. Assessing officer shall within 30 days from the date from today provide to the respective assessees information and material relied upon by the revenue so that assessee can reply to such notices within 2 weeks time. That means assessing officer has information which is collected by him while issuing notices under the old law. What we call it earlier, we used to call it reasons recorded for. So that reasons recorded for will become information collected by him as per 148AB. And then he is issuing notices under 148A. Now, therefore, does he have power to collect any new information? Does he have power to give any new data to be collected? No. Information what is collected by him for up to 31st of March 2021 or before issuing a notice till 30th June 21, he has to supply that information which is recorded by assessing officer, which is very clear from the Supreme Court's direction. Assesses information and material relied upon by revenue. Which information? While issuing the first notice under the old law. So therefore, he cannot improve upon the information or anything else as per this section. Supreme Court is very categorical. Under the new section, you can't improve upon the information as listed therein. So you have to stick to what is already collected. Now it says that all the other provisions will apply. Now what does that mean? Now, if the notices are to be issued, are to be treated as notices under new law, what has to be seen by assessing officer before issuing notices? Under these notices, he has to satisfy the conditions which are prescribed in section 148. Notices need not be issued again. Notices issued earlier is sufficient notice to be for this purpose. However, now while issuing the information, he has to satisfy that these notices satisfy the conditions prescribed in section 148. What are those conditions? Flagged information as per risk and management strategy. And number 2, final audit objection of CAG. If your information recorded does not satisfy these criteria, note the words. If the information collected and done by the officer under the old act, if it does not satisfy the conditions required to be satisfied under new section 148, the notices cannot be treated as valid notices. This is very, very important, and all of us must to debate, discuss and understand this provision very clearly. So therefore, if the assessing officer simply sends you the same reasons recorded under the old act, when these conditions of new section 148 were not there, notices can be squashed by courts within no time, because he has to explain in that notice, I have recorded this information under the old act, reasons to believe so and so, but this information also satisfy the condition that it is as per the risk parameter criteria. This is flagged information for the taxpayer, like bogus expenditure, bogus share capital, whatever those conditions are. He has to satisfy that. Plus, he has to, or he has to satisfy that this is as per the CAG's final audit query, which is what is there. These are the two conditions that are getting satisfied. If that is not satisfied, according to me, these notices add bad in law, and when assessees are supplying reply to that, assessee must take care to ensure that if they are not complying with new section 148A conditions, they need to challenge and object to that notices, saying that these notices are bad in law. Now, as per the time limit given by the Supreme Court, all officers who have issued those so-called 90,000 notices have to issue the notices, treat these notices as under 148A, and that they have to issue the material recorded or reasons recorded to the taxpayer before 3rd of June 2022, because 30 days from the order of dated 4th May 2022 will get over on 3rd May 2022, 3rd June 2022. Thereafter, assessee has to reply within 2 weeks' time or such extended time as may be permitted by the officer. So when you are replying after 2nd of June, or if your notices are received early now, you need to be very careful to ensure that these notices are satisfying the conditions or reasons recorded are satisfying the conditions of new section 148. Otherwise, these notices can be challenged by you in the reply, as well as if need be at a larger issue to the Supreme Court before the High Court in the writ jurisdiction. So therefore, this is very, very essential. That is why later when I was saying now litigation is not going to go down by regularizing these 90,000 notices. On the contrary, litigation is going to go multiple high, not only 180, but I do not know how many times litigation will go up. So that's the point which to be noted. The fourth point, which is very crucial, fourth subclause of Supreme Court order is very crucial. All the defenses which may be available to the SSC, including those available under section 149, which I'll touch upon 1 minute later, of IT Act, and all rights and contentions which may be available to the concerned SSCs and revenue under the Finance Act and in law. Keep that in mind, in law shall continue to be available. So all the arguments which we are making just now, we have to establish that these are as per the law which is prescribed in the 148, 148A and 149, and I have full right to challenge whatever which is not in the pursuance of this law. So therefore, my view is this matter is not going to stop here. It is going to be starting of a litigation after the 3rd of June. Moment department issues those 90,000 notices and issues the reasons recorded for 90,000 notices and issues to SSC. SSC will have a right to challenge all these notices or reasons recorded and point out to them, to look at this. These are not satisfying what is required to be satisfied here. Therefore, these notices are bad in law. So therefore, reopening, reassessment is completely bad in law. And this is the starting point. Thereafter, the reassessment notices are going to come. So after 30 days from your reply, end of the month in which you submit reply, thereafter 148 proceedings start. So you have further chance to dispute the notices 148 reopening in the second round again. So we are only on the preliminary for validating the notices issued and validating the reasons given to you. On that basis, you challenge first the so-called show cause notice. That show cause notice he has to reply, and thereafter, if he is satisfied with the explanation given, then only he can complete the assessment. Then he can issue the final notice under 148 and proceed for the normal reassessment procedure. So therefore, this is a very crucial aspect which all of us must keep in mind. Now, section 149. Again, what I was referring to is now Supreme Court said the reassessment notice is to be deemed to be notice under 148A. Therefore, it is issued under the old law, not under, though issued under old law, it is to be treated as notice issued under the new law. If notice is issued under old law, time limits prescribed of 3 years in normal cases, 10 years in case of 50 lakhs and above, where there is a income represented by asset, undisclosed income represented by asset, 10 years cases, 50 lakhs for the particular year. Do not mix up with 22 Act provisions. You have to refer to the 21 Act. Supreme Court is very clear. You have to test as per provisions of Finance Act 21, not 22. 21 Act only has two limits. 3 years, 10 years. 10 years can be availed only if it has a escapement of income represented by asset. Expenditure, events, that is not applicable in that year. There is only asset. And if that is happening, then that information has to be for the 50 lakhs and more. And that information, if it is available, he can go up to 10 years if that income for 1 year is more than 10 lakhs. So therefore, you have to test the principle. Third condition is proviso to section 149. What does it say? If certain cases have become time barred on 31st March 21, that is assessment year 14-15, 31st March 22, 15-16 has become time barred. So if these notices are to be issued, treated as notices issued after 1st of April 21, and these are to be issued now, there is a good chance to argue that 22 notices issued under 22 now after Supreme Court decision are notices issued after 22. Therefore, 15-16 has also become time barred. I have good hope, I have good belief that even 15, because all these notices which are issued after 1/4/22 and up to 30th June 21, as ratified by the Supreme Court, now under this law, as per this decision, therefore will be issued along with the reasons only after 3rd of June 2020, up to 3rd of June 22. So therefore, this will have to be tested on the principle of 6 years, and certain cases which have become time barred on 31st March 22, that is 15-16 and earlier cases we have become time barred, will be valid bad in law cases as of that day. So therefore, if at all, we need to only protect ourselves from the notices issued for assessment year 16-17 onwards and not prior. Again, I repeat, 50 lakhs limit of that year was only per year. It was not for all the earlier years earlier together. It is only for that year. So therefore, we need to be careful and very carefully see the notices when they are issued. Does it mention that this is as per the flagged information? Does it say that it is as per CAG audit? Or does it say that income is escaping of that year for more than 50 lakhs rupees? Therefore, I am reopening up to 10 years. If it is not so, time restriction of 3 years will apply. And again, in any case, 6-year period is overriding provision irrespective of the income will again happen, whether it is flagged information, whether it is a CAG audit, it cannot be extended beyond 6 years before the issue of notice. So therefore, upper cap of old cases will apply. The 10 years period may be useful for the subsequent years cases, but not for the past years cases. So that's a whatever I say validly given breather to the assessees will be helpful for all assessors to make use of. So therefore, this is the important point which we need to keep in mind, because there are a host of 90,000 notices, and according to me, it will be flood, not notices, but the information which will be provided with that notices to the taxpayers, and that will have to be considered. Now, key takeaways which I would like to share with you, and that I think we can just discuss in detail, because that's the important point for all of us to keep in mind. Now, take a case. Let's go one by one point, and then we have 10 minutes, Samir.
Sir, actually, if the question answer session is there, if any queries are there, we are less time in hand.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just take 2 more minutes just to see the implications, and then we'll invite the questions.
Yeah.
That's fine, Samir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So notices issued under 148 issued during the impugned period shall be deemed to be the notice under 150. Whether proceedings should be governed by the provisions of the amended Act 21 or 22. As I clarified, 22 Act cannot be brought in picture because it is not retrospective. Supreme Court is very categorical, that is 21 only. Now, would the assessing officer have to justify the reasons recorded, information recorded, and satisfy the conditions? As I said, yes, conditions need to be satisfied, and that is present. If conditions are not satisfied, what will happen? According to me, notices will become bad in law. One relief provided by revenue is requirement of conduct inquiry after seeking approval from so-and-so. Whether the inquiry after approval so-and-so is mandatory or discretionary. According to me, it is mandatory and not discretionary. Then again, the same point which we discussed earlier, so I don't want to repeat. And time limits of 2 weeks can be extended as per the Supreme Court. And then there are defenses available, income chargeable 50 lakhs and everything, all those points are there. So friends, these are some of the points. I don't want to take your more time. Just as I was pointing out, please have a look at this circular instruction number 2225 dated 10th of December. Very important for us to keep in mind. Then gazetted officers representation made. I think it's one of the finest representation made by gazetted officers to ask for a clarification on the Supreme Court decision, which is very important. Everybody must read this. A lot of things will get cleared. Then there is a second letter of a gazetted officers again, which also has clarified. and then the CBDT instructions dated 11th May 22, which is the most confusing, one of the most confusing clarification, so-called clarification or instruction, which only unnecessarily complicates the implications of the Supreme Court decision. And our Vice Chairman was mentioning in the beginning, whether it is the decision is bad, according to say decision is not bad, but the way implementation will happen will be very, very bad and sad. Not bad only, but sad only. And this is a classic case of the 11th May 22. Friends, thank you very much for giving me this patient hearing and allowing me to study this interesting provisions of Section 148 as well as Supreme Court decision. As mentioned by Samir, the floor is open for questions. If they are relating to reassessment, please reply. Whatever possible, I will reply. Otherwise, I will reply to you later on. It could be there. And for your information, I am requesting the DTC committee to share the slides, what I have shared with everybody whoever wants to share it, so that it could be useful as per your purpose to test the validity of notices which are or information which is going to be received by you, all of you, which are handling cases. Thank you very much.
Before question session from CA Girish sir, I acknowledge the presence of Central Council member CA CV Chitresh sir and the Chairman of Directors Committee. I think he just landed from the airport. Welcome, sir.
Samir, let us proceed with question and answers.
Okay. Thanks. So I request say Girish Shah sir from Solapur, senior chartered accountant from Solapur, to please take the question answer session, sir. Over to Girish sir. Please read questions one by one for Rajan sir. Over to you, Girish sir.
रीड करना शेयर करो नको रीड कर जस्ट मिनिट थैंक्स all the panelists and Mr. Rajan Horaji for giving me this opportunity. Now I will go through the questions one by one. Question is received notice as per Supreme Court order, but no information provided, just referred in the notice, information enclosed. How to reply?
So, Giriji, that reply to your query is, Supreme Court has categorically said information recorded has to be provided within 30 days from the date of Supreme Court order, that is 3rd of June 2022. If it is not provided, that notice is bad in law.
Yes. So we'll have to refer, give an answer in that fashion that we'll have to challenge that notice.
Absolutely. You have to refer the para of Supreme Court order. As per this para, you are supposed to give this information. It is not there. Till the time notice is not given, notice is bad in law. And if you don't give in 30 days time, that 148A notice will be bad in law.
AY 1415 notice under section 148 was issued on 15/6/21. Now, letter dated 22nd May 22, the AO communicated a copy of audit objection without mentioning whether internal or revenue. As per the audit objection, the source of cash deposit in the bank account was not examined. Please give me your opinion whether notice is valid.
As I was clarifying, as of 31st March 21, 1415 has become time barred. So
Yes,
nothing
correct.
can be done for assessment year 1415, which is clear even from the circular of the department of 11 December 21. So therefore, you can safely rely on that circular itself, instruction itself, and say that only 1516 could have been issued up to 31st March 22, but not beyond that. So up to 31st March 22, if no notice is issued, for 1516 even that will become time barred. So according to me, 1415 is bad in law.
Yes, thank you. Next question is deemed to be show cause notice as per the Supreme Court decision. There is a time gap from 1/4/2021 to 4/5/22. During this period, there are various amendments in respect of provisions in section 148, 148A and 149. Flagged information concept was there, but now there is no flagged information. What is the impact of this in case of notices issued now as per Supreme Court decision? I think we have discussed this.
Yeah, very right, Giriji. I think just to reiterate what I said earlier, 22 Act amendments are not retrospective. not retroactive. At least connecting to 147, 148, 149, they are only prospective and applicable from only 1/4/22. So therefore, Supreme Court is very categorical. They have to examine the notices only as per Finance Act 21 and not for 22 Act, because that was not even brought to the notice of Supreme Court. So therefore, that is not to be looked into. Look at the conditions as prescribed under old Finance Act 21.
Next is, in the absence of records for old year, how to handle? We have requested for assessment order copies and no reply yet received. Returns were manually filed and so cannot download from IT portal 2.
So just to reply to that point, there is nothing happened change. Earlier also required to be reassessment was done up to 6 years time. There also now there's also upper cap of 6 years is already there, and 10 years cases will be very, very selective and few cases unless the income is above 50 lakhs rupees. So therefore, that excuse from our side that I don't have records is of no consequences, because that there is no change in that limit. That limit still stands, and therefore we were supposed to keep our records for the period of 6 years. If you are not done, it is up to our difficulty. That can't be the use as excuse. And information, income tax department is not bound to provide you that their copies of returns and everything. If at all you want, write under RTI Act if you don't have any copies, and you can try to get within 30 days time.
Under section 148, 10 years may be reopened, but the amendment as per section 149A(b) allows extended time of 3 years if the income escaping assessment is likely to exceed 50 lakhs. As this is so, what is the applicability of 10 years? This has also been very well
Already
clarified by
replied.
you.
Yes. Yeah.
Can we submit clarification about clarificatory information in proceeding under section 148A(b) and object to reopening? Is the AO bound to consider the same? In case of rejection, can assessee file an appeal against the order under section 148D?
So, Giriji, as I was mentioning, whoever raised the query replies, it is two-stage reopening now. It is not one-stage reopening like in past.
Yes.
So, therefore, he has to complete 148A proceedings first completed. 148 notice that finally after our reply goes within 30 days from the end of the month, he has to issue notice for 148. If he reopens disregarding all our submissions, that could be not been appealed, but it could be filed only in writ petition challenge in the court, challenging the validity of notice under 148. Because the reassessment proceedings will start only thereafter. That is under 148.
Yes. Is it necessary to resubmit the return even if there is no change in the original return file?
In fact, this is the same point which was happening in earlier also. Why is to write is, if there is no change in the income and you want to continue the whatever is done, we used to write that return filed on so and so date may be treated as return filed in pursuance of 148. Copy of return then filed is enclosed for ready reference.
Yes. Is notices under section 148 for AY 17-18 valid if received now without 148A notices?
Now 17-18 notices can be issued now, but they have to follow the procedure of 148A. Because anything happening after 1/4/21 has to go by the sanctity or the conditions prescribed in section 148A.
In case no return filed for up to AY 15-16 and the income escaped is below 50 lakhs, jurisdiction will still be failed.
As I said, prior to 15-16, nothing can be done now, irrespective of what is the income. Because that's my personal view, and I believe that is the way we should argue. Because I have found some authors or some speakers have taken a view that 15-16 is valid, but my personal view is, if notice is not issued before 31st March 22, then these are invalid. But if it is issued before 15-16 notice is valid.
in case of AY 1516, 6 years can be reopened. The time limit would end on 31/3/2021. The notice to reopen the same has been issued post 1/4/2022. What will be the fate of reopening? What are the remedies? I think this has also been very well
Bad
clarified
in
by
law.
you.
Bad in law. Yeah, bad in law.
What is the impact of profit declared by the assessee in the return? In the return is alleged by the AO that the profit entry is accommodation entry from broker. Therefore, income has escaped the assessment. But ignoring the profit entry, the result would be negative profit. What is the tax impact?
No, so I think these are two specific questions. I think let us restrict to look more general questions because this is again
Yes,
question is
yes,
here,
yes.
assessment here.
Okay.
Assessment here and everything has to be seen, then we can reply to the
Yes.
query.
Yes. In case of a lady has deposited 5 lakhs, 2,60,000 in one day and 2,40,000 next day in cash, and other credits are checks. Her son, who has purchased the properties worth 1.25 crores during that year on her name, she is a citizen of Canada. He is a citizen of Canada. She has not filed a return for the said AY 1780 due to no income. Rupees 5 lakhs were the thrift saving realized in that period and deposited the same in bank. Now my question is, she have to offer the cash as income, or can we tell the same as thrift saving realized during the year? I think this is also a personal question. So we need
That
not.
for that you have to go to Girish Bhai and Girish Bhai will answer the queries in his chamber.
Okay. In
After
one
payment
case,
of fees. After payment of
yes.
property.
In one case, during the course of 148 assessment proceedings for AY 1617, the learned income tax officer, faceless, failed to pass any final assessment order under section 147 by 31/3/2022, which was the last date for completing the assessment as against the notice issued on 30th March 2020. Now the jurisdictional income tax officer is saying he will again issue fresh notice under section 148 on the same issue, as the last date is 31/3/2023 for AY 1617. Is the income tax officer authorized to issue notice under section 148 two times on the same subject?
There are decisions of the courts. If you have issued 148 notice and if you are not processed and you have not taken any action, question is, can you issue the separate notice to revalidate the old notice? The courts have said no. If you have issued the notice under 148 and those notices have not been processed, then you can't proceed again. So therefore, officer will have to find out the new cause as prescribed under new 148A, satisfy the conditions which are prescribed therein, and then he can do everything possible as per the new law. And if he is possible to do, he can also do, if when the case is validly reopened, he can reassess the income. What he feels that is escaped assessment as per the old notice also can be there. So the decisions are, and the sectional is very clear, that is not been deleted. If the case is validly reopened, then it can be whatever income comes to his notice, including what is he found out is to be filed, can be made part of a reassessment.
Can we demand the information available with the AO to submit the reply for the notice? Is AO bound to give it on our request? Because in some cases, we can give reconciliation only if the details are given to the assessee.
Giriji, as I mentioned, I think this question is repeated. Supreme Court is very categorical. They have said information recorded has to be supplied within 30 days from 4th May to 3rd of June. Otherwise, that notices have no validity. Otherwise, notices can be squashed and it will go by the High Court decision, earlier High Court decision.
Notice dated 31st March 2021 per mail but as per speed post booked on 1st April 2021 for assessment year 14 or 15 is valid notice under section 148 of old provision with PCIT approval. I think this is also
Bad in
again
law.
we have bad in law. What is mean by asset as per section 149? Does asset means cash deposit or credit in bank account? Whether amendment to section 149 is applicable to the notice under section 148 on 148A on 25th March 2021. Again, this has also been very well clarified by you. So need not
Now,
again.
asset has been defined there. What is asset has been defined, and that asset has to be represented. Undisclosed income has to be represented by asset is immovable property, movable property that has to be disclosed. Expenditure, events that is not to be covered for the 21 amendment.
The notice issued under section 148A before 31/3/2022 for the for AY 1516, but the notice issued under on 5/4/2022, does the time limit expired for the issue of notice under 149 in above case?
If notice is issued up to 31st March 22, it is a valid notice. If it is issued after that, 1516 is time barred.
Yes.
Because that TOLA doesn't apply to the 22. TOLA applies only in first year.
Correct. In case of AY 1516 is selected for assessment under section 147 within the time limit specified in earlier law, will department have to follow new procedure?
Sorry, repeat the last question.
If case for AY 1516 is selected for assessment under section 147 within the time limit specified in earlier law, will department have to follow new procedure?
No, so if assessment is validly reopened under 1516, that is a 6-year period. That is up to 6-year period is 22 March 22. If it is validly reopened under the old law, that is before 31st March 21. Before 31st March 21, keep that in mind. If it is opened under 148 22, then new law will apply. So therefore, there has to be decided. If it is reopened prior to 31st March 21, old law will apply, and they will really be complete. Assessment would have become time barred now if they have not completed assessment. Because if it is reopened, take a case, if it is 1516 is reopened before 31st March 21, under old law, there is a time limit within which he has to complete the assessment. That time limit is already expired and he doesn't have extended time for that period.
Yes.
Girish sir, we are already late. So if any important questions, please take last 1 or 2 questions.
Yes. It's a different, but it's an interesting question. Please kindly explain whether Article 142 has been exercised in any other earlier judicial pronouncement by Supreme Court in direct tax matter or any other law.
Yeah, I was told that there are 2 matters which were discussed, 2 matters in which Supreme Court had exercised its power under Article 142, and they have done this. But according to me, with due respect to Supreme Court, this was not a fit case for 142. That's what I can tell you.
This is what I can see it, because there are repeated questions, or whatever things are there, the direct tax committee will take it to consideration, compile it, and send it to your perusal so that can be answered at a later.
Sure. That will be my pleasure. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think
and
before
sir,
the queries, I would request somebody to glance through the material which is supplied in our PPT. Most of their queries will get resolved in that, and if still any queries are remaining, I'm happy to answer those queries.
Sir, it's a nice and detailed analysis of the decision plus the provision vis-a-vis pre-amendment up to 2021 and post-amendment after 2022. It's a nice and very clear-cut explanation given providable. Thanks once again, sir.
Thank you, Giriji. And
Well,
before I
thank you,
conclude, I would just
Giriji.
like to thank my 3 of my colleagues who have helped me to prepare this. One is Nikhil Tiwari, Palak Mehta and Alek Mehta. The three of them have been really instrumental. I'm only a spokesperson for whatever they have compiled. So I'm only representing their matter before all of you. So back to you, Samir.
Well, thank you, Giriji, for your wonderful moderation today. Now, I request Jay Prakash sir from Nanded, senior chartered accountant from Nanded, Jay Prakash sir, kindly give the formal vote of thanks. Over to Jay Prakash sir.
Chandrasekhar would like to share something. Chandrasekhar is there, no? Or is Chandrasekhar is there? I would like to.
Oh, he is not on the screen.
Okay, fine. Please.
Continue, sir.
Yeah, continue.
A warm evening greetings to everyone virtually present among us. I, CA Jayaprakash Fulor, on behalf of Director Committee of ICAI, is privileged and honored to be part of this memorable webcast. We are sure innumerable open-ended issues under Section 148 of the Income Tax Act 1961 must have found reliable grounds with concrete certainty by witnessing today's webcast. Respected our distinguished speaker of today webcast, Sri CA Rajan Vora sir, and Directs Committee Chairman in his absentia, CA CB Chitle sir, Vice Chairman CA Raj Chawla sir, and respected seniors in profession and my professional colleague. I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the today's speaker, Sri Rajan Vora sir, for sharing his insight and wisdom out of his practical experience and thorough knowledge on his most debatable topic on issues in Section 148 of the Income Tax Act and its way forward after Honorable Supreme Court judgment and CBDT. A wholehearted thanks to active viewers for making the webcast a grand success, their keen participation in the webcast. I thank all the technical teams for arranging this webcast. I thank Directors Committee for giving me this opportunity to propose this vote of thanks. Thank you, sir. Over to Samir, sir.
But before we conclude, I have one announcement on behalf of Pune branch. There is regional conference on 3rd and 4th June in Pune of WRC. It is the first time regional conference out of Mumbai and placed in Pune. I think most of you must be registered already. But if you have not registered, kindly register for this regional conference on 3rd and 4th June of WRC, which will be held in Pune. With this, thanks. We will conclude this session now. Thanks a lot to all the dignitaries on the dais and all the audience also. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.